What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, shout out to the brother Lawrence for the donation to the channel via the Cash App, and he had a question. I know Lawrence is really into the NFL, and I'm not as big an NFL fan as he is, so I'll try to answer the question as best I can. But he said, basically, do I think that if today's quarterbacks could be successful or survive in the 80s and 90s? Of course, I'm pretty sure that the motivation for this question stems from Michael Irvin's rant on a particular podcast where these guys were saying some absolutely ridiculous things about people like Michael Irvin and Deion Sanders, saying that the receivers and players of their era wasn't as fast and all of that. I'm seeing more and more of that type of stuff. Like, for instance, I'm seeing people saying, well, the pitchers of the 90s and early 2000s didn't throw hard, which is ridiculous because we had pitchers like Randy Johnson and Pedro Martinez. We had, what's the guy name? The reliever that played for the Braves, John Rocker, Roger Clemens, of course. We had guys who could throw heat. But what I think is kind of skewing the numbers is today's pitchers don't have the same pitch count. Like today's starting pitchers almost never complete games. And your velocity is going to go down the longer you pitch. So, of course, if you're only pitching through 5 innings or whatever it is, or 4 innings, and it's a platoon of pitchers and everybody has a fresh arm, of course their velocity is going to be higher. And it's not always about velocity anyway, because Greg Maddux was not a power pitcher. And through the mid-90s, you could argue he was the best pitcher in the game because his pinpoint accuracy. Matter of fact, the Braves bullpen was the best in the game, and they didn't really have a lot of what you would call flamethrowers. But getting back into this question, man, I tend to think that obviously the game was far more physical in the 80s and 90s than it is today. Far more physical. So these football players who are playing into their late 30s, even a Tom Brady into his 40s, that's not going to happen back then. Too much attrition to the body as far as injuries and the wear and tear. It's not going to happen. Like, Dan Marino had a long career considering. I think he played 17 seasons or something like that. That was considered a very long career back then. To even be effective into your mid-30s, 36, 37, that was great back then. So I don't think guys are going to have the longevity that they have now at that quarterback position. In the passer era, which is what we have now, guys are putting up record numbers as far as passing yardage, and the rules are making it easier. And I guess the better way to put it, the rules today make it more difficult for defenses to stop and slow down quarterbacks. Completion percentages are much higher now. Like, I don't know the latest numbers, but judging by what I've been seeing, the average completion percentage is in the 60s now, I think, right? With some guys having completion percentages in the 70s. Whereas in the 80s, a good passer percentage was like 55%. So defenses were more effective at stopping the pass. But then again, players or teams with the run more. Spread offenses was not a common thing back then. So the passing numbers are going to be lower, right? So a lot of these guys who are having 4,000, 5,000 yard passing seasons, that's not going to happen in the 80s and 90s. A great season back then was over 3,000 yards. So today's quarterbacks, I tend to think that the guys who are athletic, guys who are pretty good passers, but they're also complementary as far as being able to run, I don't know if they'll be as effective back then. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I think pocket passers with some mobility, but primarily pocket passers would be more effective. So I think Josh Allen would still be. I think Josh Allen would be okay. I think Lamar Jackson is probably considered the best quarterback, right? But I wonder if he would be as effective more as a pocket passer. And I'm not saying quarterbacks didn't scramble back then, just not nearly as much as they do now. So I don't know if Lamar is as effective, or does the game and the way it was played forces him to be even a better passer. I want to say he's a little bit less effective, but it's hard to say. I do know this. I think anybody who's tough, anybody who has that warrior mentality, and I think anybody that plays football has that mentality, I think they'll be okay. But to have to deal with that type of physicality, where you know you're going to get hit, you're going to get blasted throughout the game. How does that affect you when you know you're not going to have the same protection? Guys aren't going to get those penalties. There's no face mask, I believe, penalty back in the 80s, right? So guys get to do all these things to you. When you're a Joe Theismann, and 1 minute you're the starting quarterback of the Washington Redskins, the next minute you're on the ground and your leg looks like a linguine. That's the reality of a quarterback back in the 80s and 90s. We've seen some gruesome injuries on the field. As a consequence of how these guys played back then, we've also seen long-term damage. And the reason why the game has changed so much, and a lot of people do complain that it's flag football, is because of that damage. And that's why guys like Michael Irvin want their respect, because of the risk that they put to themselves, to their bodies, as far as playing the game. But anyway, that's all I got to say about it. Tell me what you guys think.